I'm relieved to hear that creatine sits at the top of your supplementation list because, well, first of all, I started taking it when I was in college. At that time, I was taking it in this kind of loading mode where you take it in, anywhere from 15 to 25 grams per day, often causing some gastric distress, often combining it with fruit juice to try and shuttle it into the muscles.
Sure.
And then a so-called maintenance phase of reducing to 10 or 15 grams per day. Nowadays, I just take about 5 grams or so, although later I know you're going to tell me why I should probably be taking more than 5 grams per day, given my body weight. I know we'll get into some of those specifics a little bit later. But in addition to experiencing direct effects on muscle size and strength, which I did, I don't know how it contributed to my cognitive function, or if it does now, because there's really no way to tease that out with standard at-home tests like a scale. But it is very clear to me, based on the literature that you described, and some of which we've covered on other episodes of the podcast, that the phosphocreatine system is vitally important for forebrain function, right? Forebrain, of course, being the portion of brain, broadly speaking, the portion of brain just behind your forehead that is responsible for planning, action, setting rules and context. So even as simple as if you're going downfield in a game of soccer or basketball and you're on offense, and then you make an attempt on goal or basket, and then it switches and you go back, now you're on defense. Being on defense is very different than being on offense. And that that rule switching is a prefrontal cortical function, as is every context-dependent way of thinking or acting. And so anything that can favor function of the forebrain, I think, is good for humans in general. It suppresses anxiety, allows us to interpret what's going on for us. And so I'm very relieved and gratified to hear that creatine sits at the top of the list. Also, as I'm sure you'll point out again later, creatine is, for the most part, a relatively affordable supplement for most people. So here we're not talking about something that's really esoteric or that you have to, fly to some remote location to get an infusion of.
Right. Although I apologize to all you because I know the price has skyrocketed recently.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think nobody knows, but it's quote unquote a supply and demand issue, if you will. So those prices have gone up. There's also, of course, been shipping problems in the world and things. So every time I talk about creatine right now, people just flame me for like, oh my God, it's so expensive now. I'm like, I know, I'm sorry, but honestly, it's only so expensive because you're used to being so cheap. So when you counter the fact that you're like,
right,
yeah, like relative to the other stuff you're probably taking, relative to any other number of purchases, it still lands very high on my ROI list, my 80/20, because of that. It can be taken any time of the day. It doesn't have to be in magical combination. You talked about co-ingesting with carbohydrates. That can enhance how quickly you can get into the system. In fact, it's going to work on the exact same mechanisms. We'll probably potentially talk about hydration, but these things are shuttled. So anytime you bring in carbohydrate, that's going to be shipped into tissue as quickly as it can. Creatine then goes along for the ride, and then it brings water. Right, that's how you enhance hydration. That's why it's important to have carbohydrates when you're trying to hydrate. So you're just going to take it in there, and that's also why you get quote unquote cell swelling, which is a good thing. It's just enhancing hydration. We actually use it a ton in our post weigh-in protocols. So in individuals that have to cut water weight, creatine's a great thing to throw back in there. It's going to help you rehydrate. It's also why when you take 30 grams of it, it can pull a bunch of fluid in the intestines, and there you go with your little bit of GI distress. So there's a lot of fun things you can talk about there. I just had to flag that because every time I've been talking about it recently and I say it's cheap, people are killing me for it. So I apologize. I don't know how to make it any cheaper, but it's still fairly affordable.
Yeah, I would say relatively inexpensive compared to a lot of supplements out there.